In this lecture, we will look at some of the key developments in the Western churches during the medieval period. On February 2, 962, Otto I was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope John XII at Rome. The empire was called the Holy Roman Empire, though it was neither Roman, and since it was a Germanic dynasty, nor holy. The name of the empire is indicative of two ideals of medieval West. First, the continuing fascination with the idea of Rome. Second, the term holy reflects the close association of the state with the church. Religion, in fact, dominates all areas of life in medieval Europe. Medieval Europe was a deeply religious society. In his seminal work, City of God, Augustine presented human history as a struggle between the earthly city and the city of God. The earthly city consists of those who immerse themselves in the care and pleasure of the present world. The city of God, on the other hand, consists of people who forego earthly pleasure to dedicate themselves to the eternal truth of God. The ideals of the city of God formed the bedrock of Christian life during the medieval period in Europe. Francis of Assisi perhaps exemplifies more than any others in the medieval period the ideal of foregoing earthly cares and pleasure in pursuit of eternal gain. He was the son of a wealthy Italian merchant. However, he gave up everything, even his father, who alienated him for his generosity towards the needy, to become a mendicant monk. Monks like Francis and their monasteries formed the backbone of medieval Christianity. Monks were models of Christian life in the medieval society. What happened in the monastery were often replicated in the wider society. One such practice, which originated in the monastery and became a key aspect of medieval church life, was the practice of confession. Some monks, in pursuit of holiness, started the practice of confession of their wrongdoings to their superiors. Gradually, confession became a required practice in the monasteries. The practice soon spread beyond the walls of the monasteries, as lay people also started practicing confession. Closely connected to the practice of confession was the development of the craze for relics and saints. It developed around the theological understanding that those who lived an extraordinarily saintly life can earn merits beyond what was sufficient for themselves. Through the intercession of these saints, a sinner can avail these merits from God. In search of a tangible object to look up to in their pursuit for the blessing of the saints, relics or remnants of the saint's body or belongings were collected. Pilgrimages to those places where relics were deposited became very popular. To be vindicated before God was the utmost yearning of most people in medieval Europe. The church developed a system to assist people in their pursuit for salvation. Central to the medieval theology of salvation was the concept of merits. It states that Christ and the saints have left behind merits in the coffer of the church, which a penitent believer can avail. However, to do so, he or she has to follow the tradition and instruction of the church. So Christians, both high and low, had to live within the web of religious requirements instituted by the church. Rulers often find this uncomfortable, which resulted in a number of confrontations between the church and some rulers. One such example is what is known as the investiture controversy. As the name of the controversy indicates, it involves a heated disagreement over the right of a secular ruler to invest in ecclesiastical office. During the medieval period, ecclesiastical offices, especially of bishopric and archbishopric, were very powerful and lucrative positions with great authority over the people. Thus, secular rulers clamored to have their own men in strategic ecclesiastical offices. However, the practice of lay investiture led to a lot of corruption in the church. Identifying this as a malady, Pope Gregory VII, who became Pope in 1073, wanted to reform the church and rid the church of the practice of lay investiture. Thus he declared an end to the practice. This, however, infuriated Henry IV, the then Holy Roman Emperor. He refused to consent to the Pope's dictate. Consequently, the Pope excommunicated Henry. This puts the emperor in a difficult situation. In a deeply religious medieval society, to be outside the church was as good as death. Furthermore, it also became apparent to Henry that the German princes of the Holy Roman Empire would depose him as emperor if he did not reconcile with the Pope. Henry thus decided to seek out the Pope and accept remittance. Thus, on a cold winter day in January 1077, Henry with his wife and an infant child arrived at the castle of Canossa, where the Pope was staying. He sought for audience with the Pope. However, he was refused for 2 days. The humiliated emperor was finally given audience before the Pope. Consequently, the Pope revoked his excommunication. This controversy is an example of the dominance of the church over the secular rulers in the West, which was in sharp contrast to Caesaropapism in the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantium, where the emperor dominated over the church. Religion, or rather Christianity, was at the very heart of the life of medieval Europe. The church dominated the life of the people from birth to death. The church was the society. To be excluded from the church means to be excluded from the society. Thus the church had a strong hold over both the high and the low in the society in medieval Europe. In a deeply religious medieval Europe, much of their intellectual pursuit was also directed towards God. Philosophy and scientific knowledge were considered as tools to affirm the truth of Christianity. Theological study during the period was primarily concerned with harmonizing Christian faith with philosophy. This medieval approach to theology in the West is known as Scholasticism. Scholastic theology was practiced in the scholae, which were schools attached to cathedrals or churches in big cities. The cathedral schools were first established in the 9th century through the initiative of the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, who insisted that all cathedrals should run schools to train clergy. In medieval Europe, these schools were the centers of all philosophical and scientific studies. Logic and dialectic method were popularized, which were then applied to study Christian doctrines. Scholastics engaged in using rational arguments to present theological truth. British scholastic Anselm argued on the existence of God by stating that every man has an idea of God, a being greater than which nothing can be conceived, and therefore God exists. Theology, Italian scholastic Bonaventure stated, adds the dimension of reason to the scripture, creating a faith that is deeper. The most famous and influential of the scholastics was Thomas Aquinas. In his work Summa Theologica, He attempted to sum up the foundations and essence of Christian doctrine, belief, and morality. Scholasticism constituted a harmonization of theology with philosophy for the purpose of demonstrating theological truth. Their works were rational arguments for the Christian faith. The medieval scholastics were faithful children of the medieval church. They were utterly committed to the Christian faith. The main thrust of their theological pursuit was to build up and defend the Christian doctrine.